He claims to this day that he doesn't remember. He remembers walking into the back of the kitchen and getting a cup of coffee because he had several Tom Collins, I think, or something like that. And he said, I'm not normally a drinker. I had a few drinks. I was having a good time meeting people and I needed to sober up before I went home. I went back in the kitchen. I got a cup of coffee and I saw a woman in a polka dot dress. He said a blue and white polka dot dress.
Now, I never spotted anywhere where he calls out the woman in the polka dot dress.
I think he says that's the last thing he remembers. Well, I don't know if he said polka dot dress. You could be right.
I know that. I mean, I'm happy to get into the polka dot dress. I just never heard him call that out specifically.
Again, the conspiracy is
he's walking.
He sees a woman in a polka dot dress, and
she introduces herself. I'm the girl in the polka dot dress.
And then he doesn't remember anything from that point till they're literally strangling him on the floor and taking the gun out of his hand, and he doesn't know what he did. He's like, I don't know what's going on. And to this day, he sits in a jail cell in California. He's the longest held prisoner in California history.
Yeah.
And he claims that he doesn't remember shooting Kennedy. Dress, polka dots in my head. Never saw it coming, and I can't remember what I did. Drink, or maybe two. I wandered in to a busy room. My head was spinning. I lost the time and I got confused. Senator Kennedy, I never meant you harm. I just remember thinking how good you are. All right, welcome. Welcome, Dave, back to the
Thanks for having me.
Conspiracy Dad podcast.
Yeah.
Did you enjoy the last one?
I did.
Yeah?
Yeah. At least half of it.
We are actually recording this time, so we won't have to
this is pretty exciting.
Go back and do this over again. It was great. I think I got a lot of good feedback from people. I think it's like anything. You kind of you find your pace after a while. Mm-hmm. And I don't say we were bad. I just think that there were things that in the moment of making sure that everything was working right, that I think we skipped over, that I thought we could go back and maybe just recap some of the JFK story and maybe some things we missed. And then inevitably that rolls us into the RFK story because obviously they were brothers, and it'd be strange to think those two situations were isolated completely and had nothing to do with one another, just happened to both get shot in the head.
Yeah. I don't know any other sets of brothers that were both assassinated in a very public way.
Not so publicly.
I can't think of any others that
Not that were president and running for president. And yeah. So one of the things that this past week, I don't know why I never watched it, but it struck me is I don't know if you knew this about me, but I have a degree in journalism from the very prestigious University of Oklahoma.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember I was completely a sheep back then. Like I was a sheep. I don't know. The TV told me something and I just like, well, this was what the TV said.
Yeah.
So, and I remember being in a journalism class and it was taught by the dean of the school and he was actually really good. And I didn't think about it till this week when something popped up on my YouTube, but in that class, he started out telling us about in 1975, there was a journalist who had a really successful and compelling morning show and was kind of poised to be like the next big news guy and next Walter Cronkite. Everyone loved him. He was really good, really engaging. And then in 1976, he did a broadcast, and I don't know the right word for it, but like a series on the JFK assassinations, and was almost immediately by all of mainstream media called
a kook,
a conspiracy theorist.
Okay, yeah.
And he was really like run out of town and like not taken seriously by anybody in mainstream media.
And
this was the
name of Phil.
No. No, it was way before then. He would have had his hair back then, probably. Yeah. It was Geraldo Rivera.
I think so. Sorry, we'll stick with JFK.
Tell me what you think.
I thought you were going to bring up, didn't he do a thing he did a thing where he was looking in caves for something?
He did that too.
A series. Okay.
I think he did a series of wacky things after.
Okay, but he was on a trajectory of like a Matt Lauer.
Yeah.
Right?
And I remember in college kind of not understanding what the professor was saying because I was a sheep and I was kind of like, well, of course, if you did a broadcast on
only
Kennedy, like
crazy people do that.
Yeah, you're a conspiracy nut and you're out of the, and then now I'm thinking, I think that what he was saying was a little deeper, my professor, which was, there's some things that, if you touch these subjects, you could be put on a list. And he was kind of warning us, like, there's a line that you don't cross. And that line was JFK. And I think now, if you go back and look at it, I found it on YouTube. It's not a wacky broadcast. It is, he's interviewing Lee Harvey Oswald's mother. Okay.
Not crazy.
Well, maybe crazy, but definitely somebody that should be interviewed.
That's the point.
Interviewing Jack Ruby's sister. Again, could be crazy, but it's not like these are firsthand witnesses.
Right, yeah.
These are people that actually knew people involved. And he's asking them about their, interviewing Jack Ruby's friend from the nightclub that says that he kicked Lee Harvey Oswald out of the nightclub before the assassination, obviously, that he had some sort of interaction with him and said, don't come back in here, you communist, or something like that. Mm-hmm. And, it could be a lie, but the point is, if you watch that broadcast with Geraldo, I think it could be a case study for the development of the weaponization of the word conspiracy theorist. Mm-hmm. And that he's a perfect example of, I don't think he asked any ridiculous questions. I think that he gave everybody a chance to say their piece. And there was some pretty wacky, Jack Ruby's sister she's funny. It was definitely, I don't know the right way to say it, except it was just, I don't think it was nuts. I don't think that it was the kind of thing that you'd say, well, your career's over,
Yeah, it's not like he had astrologists on, right?
No.
And he was asking them wacky questions. I hear what you're saying. Going to family members, immediate family members.
Yeah.
Going, well, did you see anything like this? Any signs of this? That's not crazy.
Yeah, and then he was just straight to Fox News after that. So, no, I think he had to go. I think he had to do a lot of things before he got to Fox News. I don't know. He's definitely a wacky. Like now, I think he went down a trajectory of. I don't know. Wacky's not the right word, but he is. The big mustache and he's definitely got his style that is not. It's contrarian. It's definitely asking not always tough questions, but just provocative, but also kind of a grift, kind of like, you're just looking for clicks.
A little bit of a character of himself.
Yeah.
Or caricature, excuse me. Kind of like hyperbolic, but Jerry Springer would be another
Exactly.
example of that, where he started out as a relatively straightforward interviewer, and then the more he started gaining interest for these, like,
was he? I didn't know. Did he do like a real like?
but interviewer, I just know that his daytime talk show was not what it turned into. Like, it started out as more of an Oprah, Regis and Kathy Lee style, and then
it doesn't get the ratings unless you're Oprah.
Yeah, until you start having fights on your panel, then you.
I mean, she even had little people on her show, and she did the things she didn't want to have to do. You know, she worked her way up. She had to. She didn't always have the the big gig, but I don't know. I just thought it was interesting. I watched the 76 broadcast, and I had not actually ever seen that, and I have to say, I mean, I didn't see anything in it that I thought his career should be over because of this, except that he did connect Jack Ruby to Cuba and to people in Cuba and even former CIA, I can't remember the guy's name, but operatives, he'd worked with CIA. But, even at the end of the interview, he lets the guy talk, and then he says, well, like, even to his face, he says, we do have to say that you've been convicted as a felon, and although you worked for the CIA as an agent and a double agent, he said something along the lines of, you're not a believable source because you've been publicly known to lie. Mm-hmm. And even the guy said, yeah, it's true. I've been, which you don't really see a lot of that even today. Someone just clearly called someone to their face, even in a way, he said it in a way where it wasn't, the guy didn't like fight him. He was just kind of like, yeah, I'm not being mean, but you have been convicted of this. So your credibility is a little,
Yeah. Makes a lot of sense.
I don't know. So what else? We were saying we want to cover some of the things from JFK that we maybe missed to springboard into to RFK. And one of the main things was Jack Ruby's psychiatrist. And you knew about this from a book called Chaos by Tom O'Neill. Is that right?
I think that is right. Yeah.
Tom O'Neill. And I didn't know it until I think you told me earlier last week, but that there was a guy named Louis Jolly West. I think you could look up Jolly was a nickname, but he was known as Jolly West, and he was a very well-known psychiatrist. And the part of it that I didn't know was that he was head of psychiatric medicine at University of Oklahoma from 54 to, I want to say like 60, somewhere in there, which is where we're from. So that was what, the book that Tom O'Neill wrote about it in Chaos, he finds evidence that Jolly West was working for the CIA for his entire career. And that actually what he was doing was a program called MK Ultra, and they were developing, the CIA was trying to develop, what would you call it? A super spy or like an assassin, super assassin, somebody who would commit an assassination and then be able to be scrubbed of that memory or commit it unwittingly, go into a trance or something, and using things like LSD to see if they could come up with the formula to do this. And Jolly West he admits in the letters in Tom O'Neill's book that he was developing that technology at OU.
Yeah.
Which made me think like, well, that was my hometown. I wasn't alive then, but like, were there MK Ultra operatives running around Norman that I didn't know about?
Yeah. Maybe a couple of them got loose off the reservation. I just kind of happened back across this, but this is in the book, Chaos, where he had an experiment on an elephant. Did you hear about this?
No, go ahead. I just realized they didn't have the thing set on auto, so they've only been seeing me this whole time.
That's probably for the best.
I'm sorry, Dave. It'll switch here in a minute, and they'll see you.
Let's see. He dosed.
There he is.
Yeah, dosed 2 elephants.
So what did he do
at the Lincoln Park Zoo in Oklahoma City with LSD in 1962? He dosed 2 elephants.
Really?
Yeah. Looks like.
What did they do?
Well, at least one of the elephants didn't respond well and expired.
Oh, no kidding?
Yeah.
Can you imagine if somebody did that today?
Yeah,
that's worse than killing the president.
Yeah. Yeah, you're not supposed to test on animals, especially.
So that's in a newspaper that
It's on the wiki. Yeah, I mean,
he tested LSD
1962,
on elephants.
A couple of elephants in Oklahoma City at the Lincoln Park Zoo.
Well, in Chaos, Tom's book, he talks about the letters going back and forth with, I forget who it was at the CIA. There's a connection there. He was over all of that, a doctor that was over all that program. But he's saying like, oh, we're making lots of progress with formula or whatever he was working on to develop this assassin MK Ultra program. And then from there, he was moved out to UCLA, and same thing, kind of came in, was in charge of the psychiatric department. And you can read Tom's book, but it is wild.
Yeah, my recollection from the book is that, I mean, he played it pretty fast and loose with these experiments. I mean, it's kind of one of those like, well, not surprisingly, this guy liked partying with the college girls, giving them drugs all the time. Turns out maybe he was
a lot of perks,
spending some extra time with them outside of the experiments and stuff. It wasn't all in the pursuit of higher education.
Yeah.
So he's an interesting character in that book. And just directly under LSD related death of an elephant, there's a section on Jack Ruby. So just interesting, like you said, weird tie-in.
Well, even like, I don't know, 2-3 weeks ago, on Tucker Carlson had a bit on JFK, because again, that was when the Biden administration didn't release the files again. And he goes into that, and he's talking about just raising that question, like, why was this guy the doctor assigned to Jack Ruby? Of all the doctors in Texas, you had to fly this guy down from Oklahoma, and he's also the guy who was working with the CIA. Like, it's obvious there was something going on.
It's a weird thing. Kind of just another connection between, so you've got Jolly West, who is talked about in this Chaos book about Manson. This whole Chaos book starts off with a conversation between the author, Tom O'Neill, and Manson's prosecutor.
Buscleone, I can't remember the last name of it.
Who gets involved in the Robert Kennedy trial.
I haven't got to that point in the book.
So,
I'm only like halfway through.
But they don't get into that in the Chaos book. My point is, over the course of this last week, as I'm getting into Robert Kennedy, this Bugliosi pops up in the Robert Kennedy story. And so it's just one of those like, well, why is West getting tied in over here with Manson?
Yeah, I think they were running that program MK Ultra into the mid 70s when they had the church committee hearings and they had to stop, supposedly. I mean,
they don't do that anymore.
They don't do that anymore, of course. So that is shocking. Like, if you didn't know that Kennedy is shot by Lee. Lee is shot by Ruby. Ruby is rushed away to a hospital. The only person who really had a lot of contact with Ruby is Jolly West. And when Jolly West comes out of the hospital from visiting with Ruby, he declares that he's had a mental psychiatric break and he's completely insane. And that was is all downhill from there. And every time they tried to interview Ruby, he was out of his mind and he was going on. I mean, it's disturbing details. He's talking, like, they're trying to talk to him, interrogate him, and he's having like fevered hallucinations about children being murdered outside of the courtroom. And like, they can't use any of it. He's obviously out of his mind. And one of the things actually in the Geraldo Rivera expose, or whatever you want to call it, the guy who is friends with Jack Ruby, who comes on, he's like a comic who was an MC at his club. And he's saying that he claims to have visited Jack Ruby after he shot Lee. And he said something like that, like he was just not making any sense. He was saying he didn't feel good. He was saying they're giving him all kinds of injections, and he doesn't know what it's. And he was just crazy. But that key thing, giving him all kinds of injections, it's like, well, they were giving him something, and I don't know. Seemed really important. Then when Jack Ruby was ever asked a question, he was out of his mind.
Yes.
that needed to be a thing.
Right.
Which maybe he did just happen to go crazy, but
maybe
not. So just in buttoning up the JFK thing, I don't know. We could stay on that point for a long time. I guess there's just so many things that you could go into. It's just like, how many things have to be there before you start to just go, look, there's something there. You know, how many coincidences line up before you just think, this is absurd. The story is stupid. I don't know what happened. I just know that story is stupid and it doesn't make any sense whatsoever.
Yeah. One thing that I've spent some time thinking about this week is you'd think that in some ways, if the CIA is sophisticated enough to have like a Jolly West go in and turn people's brains into mush, and if the CIA can do things like create a Manchurian Candidate, there are things in both of these Kennedy assassinations where you're like, well, gosh, if they were behind this pretty sloppy work in some areas, so that I think is what makes it hard sometimes to completely buy into a conspiracy theory, is like, God, if they were sophisticated enough to make one thing happen, how did they get so sloppy over here?
It's the thing that, like, I always, you always go back and forth on it. 'Cause like you have this, like, I don't know if it's a meme or like the idea, like anyone who's worked with government knows, like, yeah, it's not good work. I mean, that joke, it's good enough for government work, and you go, well, there's times where I think, is this intentionally put out there, like this sort of appearance, or like pretending to be incompetent, so that when things go bad, you can always just kind of be like, well, I don't know, government, no one can keep a secret. What are you talking about?
Yeah.
And then you're always caught in the middle going like, well, I don't know. They had the Manhattan Project and they didn't leak anything about that. Mm-hmm. So, a lot of people were involved. So could you keep a conspiracy? I think so. I think that there are people that are polygraphed regularly. There's people that sign, they sign up for something that they believe in, mm-hmm. and they might be in a place where it's like, look, I know that the story that they're told is not the truth, but they also know it's for a greater good, and they're just not going to say anything. I don't know. I mean, is that good or bad? We're not in a position to know because we don't have the information, Yeah. It's just like hope that it's all worth it. I mean, like, to my point about JFK was like, well, maybe the CIA had a good reason to take him out, even if that's not something we all want to think about.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe he wasn't a good guy. That is another point, though, that it's very difficult to look at the JFK story now, because I think the media and the Democrat Party in general, they've kind of turned JFK into something that he wasn't now. Like, he's a saint now. He's the, at the time, I don't think he was as popular or as impactful as we like to remember him as.
It's like when a band breaks up.
Yeah. And, I think a lot of people hated him. A lot of people liked him. He's definitely a saint now, and it's like you can't say anything bad about him. So I don't know, our vision of the past, it gets distorted with nostalgia and, lies. So RFK, I don't know that you could probably look up the dates. You could look up like a rough outline real quick, but I'll just go through the story for anyone that doesn't know, if you're like completely new to the topic. After Kennedy is assassinated, Robert Kennedy is still Attorney General, and there's a lot of discrepancy between historians and conspiracy people and mainstream media about the relationship between Johnson and Robert Kennedy and JFK. And it's anywhere from Johnson was a saint who loved Jackie Kennedy like a sweetheart, and there's nothing, he never did anything wrong, to he obviously killed Kennedy and they all hated each other, and he was a bipolar alcoholic that, just did all kinds of terrible things. Again, there's that spectrum. And I find myself somewhere in the middle where I think he was a complete, I was going to cuss and I said we weren't going to cuss on here. complete not nice guy. But to say someone's not a nice guy doesn't necessarily mean that they would assassinate the president of the United States.
Not the same thing.
Not exactly the same thing. I don't know if Johnson played a role in Kennedy's assassination, but I do think that it must have been incredibly awkward. The relationship between Robert Kennedy and Johnson after the fact, whether it was hostile or just weird, because he was the attorney general. So it's like, the number one suspect would have been Johnson. You know what I mean? Like, well, who stands to gain something from this assassination, really? Well, that guy. And so I think eventually Kennedy resigned as attorney general. And I believe for the rest of Johnson's presidency, he didn't have an attorney general.
Oh, yeah. I couldn't say.
Or for a while at least.
Yeah, I thought you were going to say, I think Kennedy took a little bit of time off.
He took time off. He traveled.
Ran for Senate. Is that right?
Well, people wanted him to run for vice president.
Right.
For Johnson. Mm-hmm. And there's discrepancy about that story about, people were saying, and that Kennedy looked at it as a way to get back in close, like keep your friends close, keep your enemies closer kind of thing.
Okay, yeah.
I don't know if that's true, but I do know a lot of people wanted him to run for vice president, and or you wouldn't run. I guess you would be appointed or something. I don't know how that works if the vice president shot, but I don't think we had a vice president for a while. Or no, we didn't have a attorney general, and I don't know what happened with the vice president. Maybe they didn't even have one. I don't know. But either way, he ran for Senate in New York and won.
Right. Yep.
And then eventually gets to run for the presidency. And that gets all to the Ambassador Hotel in California. Mm-hmm. And do you have the date on that when he ran? Is it 73?
June, the Ambassador Hotel?
Yeah, when he was actually assassinated.
Is 68. So
68, okay.
June 5th, shortly after midnight. So the event is June 4th, but and
it was the presidential nominee for the Democratic Party.
Correct. Yeah.
In California.
Right. Yeah. So Kennedy had just come from Oregon, which didn't go very well for him, gets to California and wins the state for the Democratic primary. So now he's on a trajectory. Most accounts are that now that he's won California and he was kind of neck and neck with McCarthy, like this kind of locked it in for Kennedy. Like, you are going to go, you're now the Democratic candidate and most likely going to win the presidency. Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. That's, of course, when you're watching some of this documentaries, similar to Jack Kennedy, they like to call him. Now, Robert's the Saint, right? Same thing where they're like, he was going to win presidency. I wasn't there, so I don't know. But they do have a few cuts of people that, plenty of people did not like him at the same time. So.
I think that Robert Kennedy, I think it's fair to say he, who knows, but very likely would have become president.
Looks like it, yeah.
Yeah, he had a lot of support.
Some would say he must have been looking like it a lot, more than some people wanted him to.
And I don't know about. I don't think that he's quoted as saying this like on the record, but there are a lot of people who say that they heard that multiple times that Robert Kennedy said to Johnson, "I'm going to run for president. I'm going to find out. I'm going to reopen the Warren Commission. Right. I'm going to find out who killed my brother." Mm-hmm. And if he did in fact say that to Johnson, definitely, I mean, it's changes the equation a little bit.
Yeah, I never heard that specifically, but more than one account is that, as an attorney general, it's kind of in his blood to seek out who done.
Yeah, and as I understand it, he was a good prosecutor. Like, he was, in many ways, that's why their dad, Joseph, wanted Robert to be attorney general, because he was kind of a real straight shooter. He prosecuted a lot of their family friends. Like, he was he pissed off the mafia. He pissed off a lot of their judges that his own family had like in their pocket, And so I think that he wanted him in that position because Jack, John F. Kennedy, was cool-headed, and he was a cool guy. He was the guy that could charm everyone, but he was also sleeping around with a lot of women and pretty wild, not a real reliable guy in that sense. And so that was kind of the strategy was, Robert Kennedy there to kind of keep an eye on his brother and watch his back. And so as a prosecutor, yeah, I'd say he seemed to be not corrupt. I mean, and I think the American people, he had a lot of trust, I think, with the American people.
That's true.
So what happened next?
What happened next? Well, the polls come in. He's won the Democratic Party in California. He goes up, gives a short acceptance speech, kind of a celebratory, thanks his dog, and then his wife steps off a stage, and he's getting escorted. He's going to go do a press conference, kind of a late night press conference to, go on to talk about this, what he's just won. That's when he's escorted into the pantry, they call it, or the kitchen area of this Ambassador Hotel. And then all hell breaks loose.
Yeah, it's we could backtrack a bit to imagine this is a movie. Okay, we're in Kennedy's. You see a back profile with the audience, and he's giving the speech, and everyone's getting excited. Cut to sidewalk, and a lonely Palestinian man walking down the street, scuffling his feet, kind of looking for something to do, and he sees a poster. No, he sees a newspaper, I think, that's like Kennedy wins Democratic primary, and then somebody walks by and he says, "Where are you going?" He's like, "We're going to the Ambassador. There's a big party because the senator won." And so then he says, "Oh, it sounds like a good time. I'll go
come check it out.
I love Kennedy. I'm gonna go check it out." That's what he said. And so then this lonely kind of what's the best way to describe Sirhan? Kind of you wouldn't pick him out of a crowd necessarily.
No, he doesn't strike me as, if you go into the cafeteria, he's not the kid that you trip when he's walking to his table and make his food spill, but he is in the corner by himself at a table. He's trying not to be. Yeah,
he's a little sheepish. He's a little he's awkward, but anyway, so he.
But he's not so. But he's not. He doesn't stand out in such a way that you want to. He doesn't strike me as the type that would have been bullied.
He's a good-looking guy. He's not like weird looking.
No, right? Yeah, he doesn't
awkward.
Have these,
maybe he's socially awkward, but I've listened to a lot of interviews with him, and I don't think he's socially awkward. I think he's very. When he's speaking, he speaks very emotional, or he's very matter of fact. Like he says, he's really locked into the conversation. So not like. I don't think you could say he was socially awkward. I'd say he's maybe, I don't know if socially awkward is the right way. He was odd, but not odd in a way that he couldn't make friends. I think he could make friends. He was he seemed like a normal enough guy. Fair enough?
Fair, yeah. Definitely not charismatic.
No.
But yeah, he wasn't off-putting. I mean, one of the things you get from the couple of guys that were holding him down in the struggle right after the shots are fired, I mean, the accounts are he seemed pretty calm, and he had really peaceful eyes. Like that was more than one account is, his countenance was not all that malice. So, and then, a couple of interviews I watched. Yeah, his demeanor's.
So the story is, and I'm painting with a broad brush. If you're really interested there's lots of documentaries about exactly what happened, but essentially Sirhan Sirhan is this kind of, shy Palestinian man who he goes to the Ambassador Hotel, and Kennedy's giving his speech. He makes his way back into the kitchen, and he's drinking a cup of coffee. And then as Kennedy's being escorted out of the Ambassador through the kitchen to leave, Sirhan Sirhan follows him in there and walks right up to him and shoots him. The number of times he shot him is debatable, because some people say, 5 shots were fired. Some people say 8 shots were fired. Some people say more. There's a lot of, that's when you get in the funny business about the idea though, it's just really hard to know. It's similar to the JFK story in that a lot of the evidence has gone missing from the actual scene of the crime.
Yeah.
the evidence that would like, so number of bullets fired. I think it was a 5-shot revolver.
8.
And so it was an 8-shot. Okay. So if there were more than that fired, obviously that would be a problem.
Yeah.
And there are people that claim there were more than that fired and that they were lodged into a door jam
Right.
in the kitchen.
Mhm.
And then for some reason, the FBI removed that door jam and they destroyed it because they didn't have space to keep it or something.
Yeah, I think it was the LAPD.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
That destroyed it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was one of those where, yeah, exactly.
It's like Kennedy's brain. You're like,
don't you think you'd want to hang on to that?
Hang on to it for
a little
few
bit,
decades.
yeah.
I don't know.
One of the hearings I was listening to about that, the guy said exactly what I was thinking. We just went through this whole mess with his brother. You guys didn't think you might want to hang on to that door jam just in case a lot of these nutty conspiracy theories start bubbling up?
Well, and you go back and like, well, maybe it's just shoddy government work.
And the guy that's defending why they got rid of the doors is kind of that classic government dude. Like, there was no need to keep it. We just we got rid of it. You're like, you don't even seem embarrassed.
Maybe it was like, when you're in the middle of something that crazy, maybe it's just a certain amount of shock and like, I don't know, maybe you don't understand the weight of it. I find that hard to believe, but maybe there are people that they just think, well, we don't normally keep this kind of stuff after a incident. So why would I keep it now and not going like, hey man, that's big time evidence. You don't just throw away.
I have never been in an evidence room.
I haven't either.
But my understanding is that there is a lot of old evidence sitting around for crimes that likely will never get prosecuted.
Yeah.
It's just the scope of all of them. It's hard to get through all these crimes, right? That door jam, I know it takes up a lot of room, but if I'm the chief of police or something, I'd find a space for it in the corner of my office. I could figure it out, right? I mean,
you could just take a show of hands. Does anybody have room for the door jam in their garage?
I just keep going back to, anytime I've been in charge of inventory, I don't want to be the guy that lost my coffee mug.
Speaking of that coffee mug,
yeah,
a good looking coffee mug we got here.
It looks real nice. And when I think about police departments and when I think law enforcement, I think more of a military style pecking order.
Mm-hmm.
If you are in control of the inventory in an evidence room, you do not want to be the guy that goes, I don't know where it went. Like
especially
with any
the
piece
president's
of evidence.
brain.
Are you kidding me?
Or
bullet fragments out of a door jam. I mean, now specifically these bullet fragments out of the door jam, they never had those because the story goes that Wolfton, the head of the investigation, was seen pulling them out of the door jam before they really started collecting evidence. Whether or not that happened, there's more than one account that it happened, but it's just at this point that's hearsay. Right?
Well, and so just to finish out the night, obviously the crowd freaks out. I said on the last podcast that this was caught on video. It wasn't caught on video, but it was caught on camera. There were lots of photographers shooting. There's famous photos of, there's a really famous photo of a man who was like a bellhop, and he was just happened to be there, and he's like cradling Kennedy's head as he's dying, and it's really moving stuff. But there were a lot of photographs of the incident, and there's audio recording of it that's been found now and analyzed a lot. And there's discrepancy about like, oh, there's 13 shots or there's 8 shots. And
have you listened to that?
I have, yeah.
It's hard to make anything.
It's such a it's recording from the other room. And
is that what?
Well, I think it's the house. It's the sound system from the speech he just gave.
Yeah.
And there's mics in the room and you can just hear the room noise. I could be wrong about that. I'm an idiot, but whatever.
You sounded pretty well informed.
Yeah,
right up
to
the point where you said, I'm an idiot.
Well, it's that strategy the government has. Just you always put that out there just so you can claim incompetence if anyone never calls you out.
I told them
I told you I was stupid. So if you're going to try to sue me, you're suing a stupid person.
It's on
you. So anyway, the crowd jumps Sirhan. They wrestle the gun from him. He's taken away, and to this day, I mean, I know I'm painting really broad here, but again, you can look up the official story. This is the conspiracy podcast, not the official story podcast. So the broad story is he shot Kennedy because he was, even the motive today is like, because he didn't like his support for Israel or something.
Right. Yeah, it was, specifically it had to do with some planes. that Kennedy was going to
Yeah.
delegate. Yeah.
But there was also rumors that Kennedy was going to be not sending military aid to Israel. And anyway, he claims to this day that he doesn't remember. He remembers walking into the back of the kitchen and getting a cup of coffee because he had had several Tom Collins, I think, or something like that. And he said, he said, I'm not normally a drinker. I had a few drinks. I was having a good time meeting people and I needed to sober up before I went home. I went back in the kitchen. I got a cup of coffee and I saw a woman in a polka dot dress. He said a blue and white polka dot dress.
Now, I never spotted anywhere where he calls out the woman in the polka dot dress.
I think he says that's the last thing he remembers. Well, I don't know if he said polka dot dress. He could be right.
I know that. I mean, I'm happy to get into the polka dot dress. I just never heard him call that out specifically.
Again, the conspiracy is
he's walking.
He sees a woman in a polka dot dress, and
she introduces herself. I'm the girl in the polka dot dress.
And then he doesn't remember anything from that point till they're literally strangling him on the floor and taking the gun out of his hand, and he doesn't know what he did. He's like, I don't know what's going on. And to this day, he sits in a jail cell in California. He's the longest held prisoner in California history.
Yeah.
And he claims that he doesn't remember shooting Kennedy. He just blacked out.
Yeah, he's still there. And I hope this is not too much of a departure from what we're talking about, but it just, as I'm looking into all these things, other characters in this story were shot by other people. Unrelated. I mean, I'm not making a case that that's all strung in with this, but what struck me as fascinating is, like for instance, where's the guy's name? The governor of Alabama that's tied up in this story. Cesar's the fan of him. He's the governor that was like pro-segregation. And
I don't know who you're talking about.
Okay. There's a governor at this time of Alabama. He's not a Kennedy guy.
Hates Kennedy.
Yeah, he's not for civil rights. Not related to this assassination, but he's shot 5 or 6 years later. The guy that shot him is out on parole now.
Really?
One of Kennedy's.
Was it related to the case and that he was wanting to reopen the investigation or something like that? The Alabama governor, or what was the deal?
It just struck me as odd. Like I kind of just started looking into. It was weird that all these people were getting shot.
Well, if they were incarcerated in California, Newsom's just shoving them out the door now. So
is that what
it could be like? That's the point about Sirhan that's weird is that
is he in California?
He's in California and they've released tons of murderers from incarceration in California, but they won't let him go. And it's like,
now that's,
I mean, there's people on the streets that have done way worse things. Well, I don't know, worse, killed a senator, presidential candidate.
Well, that's why I looked up specifically this governor's guy that shot him.
And he got out.
Like, well, this guy's out. And then Lowenstein, one of the congressmen that's tied in with Kennedy, he gets shot, I think, close to 1980. The guy that shot him in his office, he's out on parole now. Meanwhile, Sirhan, he's been up for parole multiple times. He's had,
he can't get out. He's MK Ultra.
People taking up causes for Sirhan, free Sirhan. You got Trade, who got shot in the head in this whole deal. He's going, why don't you guys let Sirhan out?
Yeah, no, the guy, he's still like in his 90s.
I don't mean to jump ahead on all this, but when you say he's still locked up, it
means something because it is kind of weird.
The few other people that I saw from that time period that did similar things, they're all out right now.
Well, if they're, like I said, if it's a California thing, it's just the problem with they don't have enough space for all the inmates. Mm-hmm. So
I don't know where
it could just be that they're
detained.
They have to let people go. But
the Alabama governor, when I was reading about that, I thought they may have been like, that governor was not a good guy. We're kind of glad you took a shot at him.
Nobody liked him anyway.
Yeah.
So, and at the top of this is backwards the way we're going to edit it. But
sorry about.
We started. I meant to mention. So in the promo for this episode, and obviously at the top, if you've been watching, the song that's playing is a song that I wrote about Sirhan, and I don't mean to write it as I believe Sirhan. I just thought it was a really interesting idea for a song to be in the. If you listen to his story, it's a very strange but interesting story. And there's lines in the song that, like, Sirhan has said in interviews, like, I just thought he was a really good man. He said, I loved Kennedy. He was, a defender of the downtrodden and somebody that like represented, like he could be like completely nuts, but he's also like, he's clearly not, he doesn't admit to hate Kennedy. He actually says that he loved Kennedy and he doesn't know why he shot him. Yeah. He knows that he shot him too. He just doesn't remember shooting him. And he just says, I'm sorry. I wish this never happened. Now, he doesn't really necessarily directly say, I'm sorry for shooting him. Right. He says, I don't remember shooting him and I wish this didn't happen.
Yeah.
But I don't know why I would have done what I did.
Now the devil's advocate to this is this diary entry they find from like a year prior.
RFK must die. RFK must die.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I think I remember hearing some audio of him going, I just thought he was a good guy. Defender of the downtrodden specifically. I remember hearing that.
You don't hear anyone say downtrodden anymore.
You're right.
You need to bring that back.
Bring it back. Conspiracy Dad podcast. Defenders of the downtrodden.
It's probably the boomers' fault.
Just like you were talking about Geraldo saying to the guy like, hey, well, you could understand. I got to bring up the fact that you're a convicted felon. Yeah, I mean, people talk to Sirhan, they're going, well, it doesn't look real good that you've got these journal entries that say RFK must die. What do you make of that? Do you think
he seemed to maybe he had a private life where he hated Kennedy, but his family didn't notice that, and his family, they just said he wouldn't hurt a butterfly. Like they're like shocked. They're really, Sirhan, he's wanted for this murder. Which, I mean, you do hear about, people commit a crime and people kind of go, I never saw it coming.
Yes. Yeah.
I don't know. I kind of feel like there seems to be a lot of that, Lee Harvey Oswald's mom's like, no, like it just doesn't make any sense. He never would have shot the president. What are you talking about? And then, this one too, his family's just shocked. They're like, he's like almost like he's kind of wimpy. Like, would he shoot the president?
My wife is a teacher, and she's told me just in this past school year, I've heard multiple times anecdotally, she just says, well, this kid's had some trouble making good choices in the classroom. We contact the parent, and sounds like kind of the MO for a parent when they hear that is like, sometimes it's, he never does that at home. So,
never shot a senator at home.
Yeah, but I mean, it is that sort of thing where maybe as a parent, the default response is like, I didn't see that coming.
Yeah, because it's an indictment of you.
Course,
it's you raised a psycho that shot a senator. Like
one of the interviews I saw with Sirhan's brother, he says almost exactly that. He goes, all of us in our family were questioning ourselves. Like, did I have something to do with him wanting to do this? So yeah, you're right. Directly as a parent, you start asking yourself like, God, what did I miss?
Where did we go wrong?
Yeah,
what we do.
Perhaps Sirhan's dad, you should not have beat him so much when he was a child.
Well, and he did have a history. Okay, to be perfectly fair, when he was growing up in Palestine or Israel, I don't know what they called it at that time, but it was Israel, I guess, at that time. Either way, he was a part of that war, and so he was at a young age exposed to war and whatever you want to call it, PTSD or whatever. But he probably definitely had experiences as a young child that would be very traumatic and might cause you to be unstable.
Yeah, specifically, when I'm making a crack about his dad beating him, like that's one of the accounts is that his dad was abusive. More serious than that, I believe he saw his brother die like right in front of him when he was, maybe about 10 years old. So we're talking about, you're right. You grow up in a war-torn country. You're a refugee at a young age. You lose your brother and you watch him die in front of you. Your dad is not a nice guy to be around. And then you come to United States in the 60s as an immigrant.
Yeah.
So that's a rough go of it at the early couple of
but it
stages
doesn't mean, I'm going to start shooting people.
No, it doesn't. I'm just
an assassin.
Yeah, I'm just agreeing with your point that his childhood was not like most of the people around him.
So unassuming is the word I was thinking of. He's very
Okay,
unassuming.
sure.
He's
Yeah,
just
he
not
is.
a guy that you'd like think much of, honestly.
When if I were on a New York subway, he's not the first person I would be concerned about.
Which makes a perfect assassin.
Absolutely.
It's exactly what you want.
Yeah.
So since then, there have been all kinds of there's been programs. One of the coolest ones you can watch is it Darren Brown? Look that up real quick. He's a hypnotist. He's very famous. He's a British hypnotist, and he did a whole show because, okay, the overall story of what we just described is what people refer to as a Manchurian Candidate. After the movie, first with Frank Sinatra, then there's a more recent remake of it with
Oh man, yeah.
What's his
I
name?
want to say Morgan Freeman.
No, it's
just what I want to
the
say
other
when
guy.
the movie came out.
What's his name? Anyway,
Matt Damon.
The idea is
Denzel Washington.
Denzel.
That's not why I said Morgan.
Yeah. That's why I said that. Oh, you look bad. I know you didn't mean that.
Meryl Streep.
It was a great cast, but
Great cast.
it's not a great movie. Honestly, it's okay. But the idea is that, that he was this just didn't even know what he did, and he, killed. And so to me, we have to take just a bird's eye look at things. And that's how I process things. A lot of times I just think in big picture, and maybe that's why I'm interested in conspiracy theories, because sometimes I just look at it from the outside, like I said on the last podcast, and just go, well, you obviously just shot him just like you did his brother.
Mm-hmm.
It's like you didn't poison him. You didn't run his car off a cliff. You shot him on camera, on video, right in front of everybody. So it's no questions asked. Crazy guy shot him. End of story.
Do you think maybe there's a guy that botched the Kennedy assassination? Excuse me, the Kennedy assassination. Like, he was the point man for all of it. He's talking to LBJ or whoever is putting him up to it, and he's like, "Guys, don't worry, I'll handle it." And then a couple weeks later, he's like, "Sorry, that was a mess. We're getting a lot of questions, negative feedback on that one, a lot of bad reviews." So then a couple years later, they're like,
same guy.
"We got to get rid of Robert." And that same guy comes up. He's like, "Guys,
I got it.
I learned mistakes from the last. I've got
mistakes were made.
Give me a chance to redeem myself." This thing spins out of control, and he's like, 2 out of 3.
I hate to laugh about it because it's like, at the end of the day, yes, we're talking about people who were killed, and it's, yes, they were humans, and I get that, but it's also, some of it is the absurdity of the situation. But even, I think 2-3 years ago, maybe 2 years ago, so Bobby Kennedy, the Vax guy, who is Robert Kennedy's son,
I believe so,
direct son, he went and met with Sirhan, and they spoke for hours, I think 3-4 hours straight. And he came out of that meeting, and he's that's what he's doing. He's petitioning to reopen the investigation because he says he does not believe that Sirhan killed his dad, and he thinks that there were more people involved and there was a cover up, and that he wants to get to the bottom of it.
Yeah.
Good luck. But that's his son, the son of the senator.
Sure. Yeah. It's the son. And yeah, kind of like we touched on before, this guy Paul Schrade, who's Auto Workers Union, who was standing on.
He was also shot.
Yeah, he's standing on the pulpit with Robert Kennedy during the acceptance celebration speech. They walk off the stage together, go into the pantry, and yes, Robert Kennedy gets killed. This guy also gets shot in the head. He survives miraculously, but
for a long time too.
Goes on to be an advocate for Sirhan Sirhan, which is pretty wild.
And there's more strange to it. One of the strangest details that big picture I saw in it, you can look up his name, look up the original director of Manchurian Candidate. It's John Frankenheimer, I think. So when I learned this, I researched it years ago when I was writing the song, that I just could not believe, like, it's all like, just, I don't know, it's just circumstantial, or it's just not, it's not like a direct smoking gun, but it's so wild that you just, it goes back to like when we talk about the simulation hypothesis, and I'm saying it's just lazy writing in the simulation. It's like when Princess Di had to die, or when Bernie Madoff made off with all your money. And then this guy, he's the director of the Manchurian Candidate.
Anthony Weiner had a
he just couldn't keep his wiener.
Yeah.
It's like it's lazy writing in the simulation. I think it's just when the CPU is just like gets bogged down. It's like a bottleneck, and it's just like glitches for a second.
Path of least
like,
resistance.
Yeah. It's like we got too much data right now. Just do something stupid, and then most people don't notice it. I think that was it Frankenheimer?
Frankenheimer. Yeah.
So he's the original director of the Manchurian Candidate with Frank Sinatra, and he's also good friends with the Kennedys.
Yeah.
And so the day of the assassination, Kennedy, Robert, is at his house in California, and like
he
all day.
The night there.
Yeah, like they've been there for a
before.
while. And they've been there all day. They're good friends. They're hanging out all day. And Kennedy almost didn't go to the acceptance speech because he was tired. And John, the director of the Manchurian Candidate, was the one who talked him into going to the acceptance speech. And so in that room, it's just too weird to say, like, you're telling me that he got shot by a Manchurian Candidate while he's standing next to the guy that directed the Manchurian Candidate?
Yeah.
What is going on? I mean, what are the odds? Now, I'm not implicating that John Frankenheimer had anything to do with it.
Saying that, I just hear what you're saying as far as like lazy writing on the part of the simulation.
Yeah.
Like, you're kidding me? The guy that directed the Manchurian Candidate is the one that just by chance goes, "Hey, thanks for coming over. Really think you should get moving on to that acceptance.
Get to that. Make sure you make it to the ambassador tonight by 8:00. We really need you there by 8:00. Yeah. And there's somebody else, I can't remember who it was, who was in the room that was CIA. I'd have to look it up. It's escaping me, but I mean, he was the MK Ultra guy. Like that's what he was doing for the CIA. He's like in the room. He's in there. What was his name?
Photos of him and a couple other CIA operatives. I don't see his name in front of me, but I just noticed that as I'm glancing through the Wikipedia.
And not to say that they couldn't go to the acceptance speech, but you do have to, like, if I am investigating this, those are the first people I would pull aside and say, "What were you doing there? Like, why were you in the room?
Yeah.
Who were you there with? Like, why, do you even live in California? Like, why are you here?"
Yeah.
I think they did because they were all working with Jolly West at UCLA, and so they did just happen to be
parties there. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that there's lots of speculation. I mean, who knows exactly what happened? There's been all kinds of recreations of Sirhan. I don't know if we even say the whole story. So he sees the woman she's a polka dot dress. There were also people that witnesses that saw that woman leaving with somebody else.
Yeah.
And weird things like running out the back of the building saying, "We just did it. We did it." And she did. So like, did what? We're like, we killed the
can we
killed him.
That first a bit?
Yeah.
Because that was something that really struck me. There are a couple things about it. One is the woman that's on national, like the first time America hears about the woman in the polka dot dress. About.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She was campaigning.
Serrano's her last name. Sandra Serrano. Yeah. She's one of the campaign workers. And the shooting happens, she's kind of caught up in the chaos, lots of people running around. She tells someone that she saw a woman in a polka dot dress running out the fire escape, like kind of gleefully saying, "We shot Kennedy. We shot Kennedy." Like they're excited.
With another man too.
A couple of, she said Mexican-American men is what she said.
Cubans.
First. Well, I don't know. Later on, she said just not Caucasian, but initially it was Mexican-American. So the person she tells this to says, "Come with me. Well, let's go tell law enforcement." Well, again, lots of people running around, chaos. Somehow she gets grabbed by a news reporter on her way to go talk to the authorities. They stick a mic in her face, and that's when you get this account that we can YouTube now of her going, "I was out on the back fire escape getting some air. I hear this woman comes through in a polka dot dress. She's excited. She's saying, 'We shot him. We shot him.' I say, 'Who?' She says, 'Kennedy. We shot him.' And then I go into the ballroom. There's chaos. Pretty much we get here. Now, are you familiar with this police interview she had I mean, within just days of this.
I think so, where they're trying to talk her out of it.
It's like a heavy interrogation.
Yeah. They keep telling her, like, no, you didn't see that. That's not what you saw. And she's kind of like, no, I think that's what I saw.
And eventually they wear her down to the point where she signs their statement that, is like, nah, okay, fine. I didn't see that. But to this day, she still goes on and says, yeah, they pressured me into it, which I wouldn't believe, except for the fact that there's audio recording of this. And
she clearly said something
again,
else.
I keep wanting to call it an interrogation, but it's not an interrogation. She's not a suspect. She's a witness.
Yeah.
And, I think of myself as she was 20 years old at the time. Imagine you're a 20-year-old female in the 60s. So it's even more of a male-driven world. You're talking to a detective, so an authority figure who's probably 10, 15 years older than you, about a very important case, right? You're just there. You want to help.
Even in light of JFK,
it's a murder.
Like, that president was killed.
Yeah.
His brother just got shot.
Yeah.
And you better get your story right.
Yeah.
You're in big trouble.
She thinks she's just helping out. She tells him the same story we just went over. And you're right. You listen to this recording, and this detective is just wearing her down over time and going, no, that's not what happened. We both know what's happened. Saying crazy stuff like, for all we know, Robert Kennedy's in here right now in spirit watching you lie to us.
Oh.
And just listening to it the first time, I thought, this sounds like an interrogation when she's just, on her own volition here, giving an account of what she saw. Really crazy thing is to listen to that and then juxtapose it to Thane Caesar's interrogation or his interview.
Mm-hmm.
Police.
Well, we didn't even talk about who he's. Tell him who that.
Sorry, yeah. So
tell him about Caesar.
Yeah. So Thane Caesar is the security guard who's full time. He's a plumber. He's just part-time gig doing security at the hotel for this event. He happens to be the one walking Robert Kennedy off the stage onto the press conference. So he's standing right next to Robert Kennedy when they go into the kitchen, the pantry. Shots fired, presumably from Sirhan Sirhan. From Caesar's own account, he has a hold of Robert Kennedy's elbow, pulls him to the ground. So basically, like, Robert Kennedy falls on top of him, and there's speculation that he's the second gunman and all.
Yeah, that he was even accidentally discharged his gun as he's pulling it out, and
he's hearing shots fired. He's a security guard, and so I mean, there's a lot to that. I mean, a lot of people believe that. I believe Robert Kennedy Jr., that's his take, is he thinks that it was Caesar that did it. But anyway, as it pertains to Serrano's interview with the detective, I listened to Caesar's interview not far after that. And that police officer's kind of like, hey, Caesar, so did you shoot Kennedy? And Caesar's like, nah, man, I didn't do that.
He's like, I hated the guy, but I wasn't going to shoot him.
Yeah. Fair enough. Have a good afternoon, Caesar. I mean, it is way less intense. And this guy.
Yeah. And I don't know if, wasn't there something with his gun went missing too?
Yeah. So they go, well, you did have a gun, right? And he's like, yeah. And they were like, what model gun? I believe he said he had a different model of gun. It was a 22 that killed Robert Kennedy. And it's a 22 that they found on Sirhan. Caesar says he had a 38. And they go, well, do you still have that? And he's like, oh, man, I just sold it. And still they're like, fair enough. Have a good afternoon.
Yeah. And so, I mean, some people think, to me, that doesn't make sense. Like, maybe he accidentally shot Kennedy. Mm-hmm. Maybe that was just like, if there was a conspiracy to kill Kennedy, I don't think that Caesar had anything to do with it. He might have just been an extra bullet going somewhere that was useful to the people that wanted it to happen. Yeah. Who is it that I heard somebody say, it was somebody was describing a mob hit recently. He said, yeah, he slipped in the shower and fell on a couple of bullets. You know? I don't mean to make light of it, but I thought it was a funny way to say it. It's like, maybe whoever was orchestrating this, if there was people orchestrating it, some of these other people that get involved, they could have had nothing to do with it and still fired a gun in the scene. And it's like, Caesar's just an idiot, but
that's not crazy that he pulled his gun and shots were fired amidst all this chaos. I think you bring, it's worth noting. Yeah, this guy, Caesar, was not a Kennedy fan, and he was pretty transparent about it publicly.
Which was not what you would say if you were trying to hide the fact that you just accidentally shot the president.
Yeah. It really, I mean, I'm no investigator. Nobody asked me.
We are investigators.
Except for my buddy Dante. But every interview and everything I hear from Caesar is like, you can dislike the guy and you may not like his views on, social things or politics, but he's pretty upfront about like you said, I don't like him, but I didn't shoot him,
Yeah.
And you're right. There are things that he admits to in some of his public, accounts that you go, yeah, if I had assassinated this senator who was about to become president, I don't think I'd be blabbing about the fact that, I hate his politics and I think his brother is a communist and all these crazy things that you go, you're just setting things up to where it sounds like you are the one after.
Unless he's a mastermind and he's playing 4D chess.
Totally.
And has us all.
And that's why this polka dot dress woman doesn't seem like 4D chess to me.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because
probably the most incredible witness that was not taken seriously and actually seems like they really distorted her. I mean, you're talking about like right after the incident, and to not investigate those people, to not put out an FBI like woman in a polka dot dress. We need her now.
Yeah.
And I think they did find some woman, but it didn't look anything like who she described. And it was like blonde hair, blue dress, no polka dots. It's like, that's not who she was describing. There were, hundreds, if not thousands of people there. It's it'd be hard to track them down, but to not even take that seriously just sounds like a cover up.
It does. One thing that I came across looking into this was, it's that idea of like a lot of these conspiracies can be explained by just, people being lazy or incompetent or just having a bad memory, whatever. The Kennedy campaign did not want the LAPD at this event because at the time, I don't know if you guys heard or not, but the 60s were a bumpy ride for the LAPD in the public eye, right?
And the Democratic Party in general didn't want them
Correct.
involved.
Yeah, you got Robert Kennedy, who's a big leader for civil rights. And we'd had, the LAPD had bad optics with the black community at that time. And so, Kennedy's campaign says, we don't want LAPD there. It doesn't look good for us to have you guys with us.
We want Caesar.
And you can hear some of the police officers that were on the LAPD at the time, in interviews later on, they're like, we were kind of like, well, fine. We don't want to help you out then. So they were not chomping at the bit to, to get to this. Yeah. Right. I mean, they were kind of like, they didn't care too much
maybe
for Kennedy either.
Maybe some of that plays into the losing evidence thing where maybe it's not maybe they just didn't like the Kennedys.
Yeah. Could be.
And then there's a lot of LAPD that was just like, you know what? You guys weren't too nice to us. Now we're just going to let this kind of fall apart.
My brother and I were staying at a hotel recently, and he was upset that they didn't take the trash out, that it was on us to take the trash out. So he threw our trash bag out the window. It was kind of like, take that. Maybe the LAPD was just throwing their trash off the balcony going like, we think you should have to pick it up.
Maybe.
Yeah.
So what exactly happened? I will say, when I say there's a spectrum of conspiracy people, this is one that I think there's obviously a conspiracy. I think that with both of these, with JFK, again, I'm not in a position to say that I know what happened because most of the evidence was destroyed and lots of things have fallen through the cracks. And there's just been so much since then. And the people that could put these things to rest, just haven't over the years. They've refused to, or there's been all kinds of things that have happened. So it's as a consumer of media, it's very hard to say at this point, like what exactly happened, except I just know that story is BS. And I don't think that, I think it's entirely possible that Sirhan Sirhan did go into some sort of trance and shoot Kennedy, but I do think there were more people involved. I think that the uh, it sounds so crazy. I get it. It's like MK Ultra sounds crazy, but it's like, this was a thing. And it was a very, we'll do an episode on MK Ultra, but this was a big program that they were running, and their sole, goal or purpose was to create something like what Sirhan did.
Yeah.
And, was it Darren Brown? Was that who it was? The hypnotist?
Yes.
So Darren Brown, he proves in that episode, he goes through and he picks people and he shows as a hypnotist that there's some people are not here. We can do a test real quick. There's a test to see if you're susceptible to hypnotism. He was on Joe Rogan's podcast, but like if you look up at the ceiling.
Okay.
And like he would say, you probably are not that susceptible, because he said you can see people's eyes like flutter a little bit when they look up. And for some reason, those people are more susceptible to it. But anyway, there's a lot of people, there's people that are very easily hypnotized. There's people that are virtually impossible to hypnotize. And he takes a group of people and basically recreates this exact scenario to create an assassin, and has a guy do that. He trains him to use a gun, woman with polka dot dress and everything to trigger him. And he attempts to assassinate somebody like on stage in a theater. And then he brings him out of the trance, and the guy's like, he has no idea what he just did. Mm-hmm. So is that proof? I think that there are people that, whether it's through drugs or you're going to ask if I've been hypnotized.
Yeah.
I have not, but I've played gigs with hypnotists.
Yeah.
The saddest thing you'll ever see is like a bad hypnotist bomb on stage, which I've seen.
Not working.
Not good.
You probably see, I mean, I'm the type of guy that if that's happening and I'm one of the subjects, I'll try and act hypnotized.
Maybe that was what he was trying to do.
Kokomo, who at some point is going to have to get on here and talk UFOs, he's been hypnotized.
Did he actually go into it?
Yeah. And he says it's pretty weird because you're lucid. You kind of know what's happening, but you just don't care that you're doing what this guy told you to do. So you'd have to ask him about it.
I think it's a thing. I mean, Darren Brown, he does it. He hypnotizes people. To answer the question, can you hypnotize somebody to do something that's against their morals that they would never normally do? The CIA would claim, no, you can't do that.
Why would we want to do that?
But Darren Brown and I think a lot of other hypnotists say, yeah, there are people on the planet who are very susceptible that, yes, you could get them to do something like that, and they would have very little, if no, memory of what they had just done.
Yeah.
Now, maybe.
You've got that deep into the conspiracy. Sirhan was hypnotized, MK Ultra, and then the far other end. So we were talking last time about there's way over here, there are lizard people. What mouth breathing sheep is. We
should get a shirt that says that, mouth breathing sheep. Can we just refer to them as mouth breathers from now on?
I would like that very much. Yeah.
I don't even know what that means. It's just what I thought.
My understanding is the way I used it up until now, when I'm going to use it our way. Mouth breather is just someone you don't think of as very bright.
Yeah,
but it just stands there. You know, Seinfeld, where Putty's sitting on the plane, just staring at the seat in front of him.
Yeah, Putty is a mouth breather.
Yeah. You're just gonna stare at that seat in front of you.
Yep.
That's right. So the other end of this, the counter to this story is The Killing of Robert F. Kennedy is a book by Dan Moldea, who set out to prove exactly what you're saying. Like, he was certain that Caesar was the guy. Well, he wasn't proving what you're saying, but he was certain that it was a conspiracy. He was for sure that he was going to be able to lock down Thane Caesar, as the second gunman. And by lockdown, I mean, this Moldea is a writer that has a record of getting mobsters to admit to crimes they had done. Right. So he's thinking, like, he goes and sells to his publisher. Mm-hmm. The whole selling point of this book is, I'm going to get the second gunman to admit that they did this. By the end of the book, he's talked himself out of it. He's like, I don't think that guy did it.
Meaning Caesar, though.
He means Caesar, but by the end of the book, he's worked himself back to, like,
he thinks Sirhan did it.
I think Sirhan did it, and I think maybe
I don't disagree. I think that Sirhan did it. I think Sirhan knows he did it. I think that he was MK Ultra. I think that there's more to the Sirhan story, like that we don't have time to get into, but like there were events that happened leading up to it. He was,
we didn't even get to talk about the horse track,
and he was out at the gun range, just hanging out with a bunch of NRA people. And he doesn't, every time he explains things, it's like he almost doesn't know why he was doing it.
Yeah.
He just explains it in the exact way that you would expect an MK Ultra operative to explain it.
Yeah.
Why are you sharpening that knife? I don't know. I just feel like I should sharpen this knife. Why are you out at the gun range today? I just felt like working on target practicing. Why?
You're right, because even when he gives his account of that day, I think, like, what a leisurely day. You went to the gun range and then you went and had some drinks at this campaign party. Like,
yeah, maybe it's because I have 5 kids, but my God, if I had time to just wander around and do that stuff.
Yeah,
I guess if you're 20, I don't know.
Yeah, you're just walking around, shoot your gun a little bit, and then
it's an odd day.
Yeah, like
everything before the assassination is an odd day.
Yeah,
it's like
the assassination is also
assassination is pretty
unusual. Yeah,
unusual. A departure from normative behavior would be the best way to describe it. But I think that, I think something was there. I don't know if we'll ever, like we said, his own son's pushing for reinvestigation. I don't think you're ever going to get it because the only way you're ever going to get it, I mean, even today on Rogan, again, he had Mike Baker is a CIA guy he's had on quite a few times, and they were talking about Tucker's piece, and they were talking about, and Mike's thing was, even Tucker his thing was he's quoting an anonymous source. And he did say, like, look, if you're an anonymous source in the CIA, it's been 60 years, come out, say something, and Mike is skeptical. He's like, yeah, I don't think so. But, I think unless those people do come out and say something, we all have to remain pretty agnostic and just in this place where it's like, I know that's not the story, but I don't know the story because we don't have near enough information to be able to say, I know what happened.
Right.
I mean, it's weird.
Yeah. As a conspiracy dad, I think it's kind of like when you ask your kid what they've been up to and you know that it's not something they should have been doing, but you can't say for certain what it is. You just know that they're guilty. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, what are we going to talk about next?
MK Ultra comes to mind.
Now, we might have a guest come on for that.
Oh, great.
We released last week, and my buddy Barrett turns out to be a big into conspiracies too. And he's also a fantastic musician. We never really explained that for people that don't know us, but we're musicians. We're in a band called Dante and the Bird Dogs. We played a band called Dante and the Hawks. We played in lots of groups, and a lot of my musician friends are also interested in these topics, Barrett being one of them. And he had read Chaos and was a big fan of that book. So
cool.
I thought it'd be cool. Maybe we'll do on the next one. Let's talk about Chaos, MK Ultra, maybe get into a little bit about Manson. And I'll be interested to hear what he has to say. And there's a lot, there's just so many. I mean, aside from the Tom O'Neill book, that kind of gets into the Laurel Canyon scene.
Oh yeah.
That I turned you on to.
Yeah.
And it's like people coming to the same conclusion, but from totally different, I don't think they're even connected to each other.
Yeah.
And Charles Manson being kind of at the middle of that. And, I think that he was MK Ultra too. And he maybe just like they were testing things, but.
And you talk about a couple of people that society's not going to really care if they go missing for a time and really not going to be upset if you lock them up for a while. I mean, now Manson is not like Sirhan in that he's got the crazy eyes and, he is one you would notice on a subway, but
he's the guy that you would be using as a beta test.
Yeah.
Sirhan's the guy that you would actually implement in the field.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Right.
And that makes sense because you would always beta test on people that could easily be discredited for many other reasons.
Sure.
And then the guy that you'd use for the actual plot or whatever, he'd have to be, he'd have to not have raised any red flags up until that point, because you never know.
Yeah, there's no way Manson is just strolling into the back of the kitchen at that campaign party.
I think people
are going to be like,
well, he'd have the family with him, so he'd have all these naked hippies and
smelly women walking around.
All right, that's enough for this episode of Conspiracy Dad. Thank you for watching. If you'll do the subscribe thing and the like, follow, everything on the social media accounts, we'll look forward to seeing you guys next week. So thank you, Dave.
Thank you.